I'm very pleased to follow my friend and colleague, the member for Blaxland, and that the member for Greenway is in the chamber as well, and the member for Werriwa, three other Sydney MPs who represent multicultural electorates who are proud of the fact that Australia is the nation that we are today, because with the exception of the first Australians, we are all descendants of migrants, be they British migrants or migrants from all over the world who've come to make Australia their home. When I see a bill which is aimed at an existing law, the starting point is always, what problem is it trying to fix? If something's broken, then it is a responsibility of this parliament to intervene and to create new laws, to update the laws of the nation, to make sure that it becomes fit for purpose. But with this piece of legislation, indeed, even the very title of the bill, including the word strengthening, it implies that there's something weak about existing arrangements. We're asked to accept that being able to speak conversational English is no longer sufficient for people to become Australian citizens. This is snobbery of the highest order. Will now require people to pass a university-level English test, a test which, frankly, Mr Deputy Speaker, there are members of this House I would question whether they would be able to do that. We're asked to accept that being a law-abiding citizen who has lived here for 4 years is no longer enough to justify the privilege of Australian citizenship. Under these changes, people would be required to demonstrate that they possess Australian values and that they have integrated into our community. Now, I am always pleased to keep an open mind when it comes to legislative amendments, but the truth is that there is no evidence that this legislation is necessary. It didn't originate in the bureaucracy. It certainly didn't come from our national security agencies. It has its genesis with the ideological obsession of some of those opposite in the Liberal Party. A Liberal Party that is prepared to play politics with issues of our national citizenship. To me, I think that the issues of citizenship, national security and law and order should be taken very seriously indeed. What they shouldn't do is become a plaything for the Liberal Party's internal divisions based upon some in the Liberal Party who hark back to a golden era of white picket fences, Anglo-Saxon culture being predominant in this country, a lack of diversity and a lack of modernism that has made Australia the successful nation that we are today. And my fear is that this is all about the culture wars, where the Prime Minister has been prepared to just throw out all the things that he knows Australia needs, is prepared to throw out decades of conviction that he has held in order to appease the culture warriors in the right wing of the Liberal Party. So I think this is an extraordinary proposition that comes before the parliament, which is why we have referred this bill to a Senate inquiry and why the member for Watson has moved such a comprehensive second reading amendment to this legislation, because there have been no arguments put up for its adoption. And let's just have a look at some of the issues which are specifically created by this legislation. Firstly, the issue of English tests. The fact is that the tests which people currently sit for is of course written in English. The existing courses teach what is known as competent standards under the International English Language Testing System. The change means that what would actually be required to be competent in English is a university level of English, which would change the whole dynamic. One of the great privileges that we have as members of Parliament is attending citizenship ceremonies. And what you have then is people from, in my part of the world, people from all over the world, from Asia in our region, South America, from Africa, from Europe, come and pledge their allegiance to this great nation. And it is extraordinary the emotion that people feel. There's no better place to be in Australia than Enmore Park on Australia Day on the afternoon at those citizenship ceremonies. There are tears, there are hugs, there are people proudly waving the Australian flag, there are speeches, and there are a huge gathering of family and friends of those people who are becoming citizens on that day. It seems to me quite remarkable that the legislation before us is aimed at making it harder and making the process longer for people to enjoy those ceremonies. That, to me, flies in the face of what we should be doing as a nation, which is encouraging people to declare their allegiance to Australia, encouraging people to become full citizens and to participate fully in the civic life of this country. These people currently pay taxes. These people currently work damn hard in this country. If you have a look at the sort of jobs that are conducted in menial work in particular, whether it be in the agricultural sector, the people who clean our offices here in this building tend to be people who have come to Australia to make a better life for themselves and for their families. And they work hard, they don't ask for much. What they do ask for and what they expect and what they deserve is respect. And that is what this legislation does not give them. This legislation changes the parameters of the debate from one in which we're encouraging people to become citizens into one in which we are thinking up barriers to citizenship and barriers to that civic participation, including voting, which may well be the motivation of those who are putting forward this proposition. The extraordinary thing about this as well, the requirement of university level English, is that none of the proposals put forward by the government speak about an increase in funding to assist people to learn English. Indeed, the Adult Migrant English Service and other activities, the attacks on TAFE, have undermined the participation by community members. We don't expect people to have a PhD in English in order to be citizens, unless we're deliberately putting the qualification bar so high that we are excluding people. The other issues in the bill are issues including the extension of time which are there for people to become citizens. It is interesting that national security agencies haven't even been consulted on the issues in this legislation. We take a bipartisan approach to national security issues. I had another briefing this morning about transport security. I've worked very constructively with the Minister, Darren Chester, on all the issues that have been raised in recent times about threats to our security, and Labor has never played politics with these issues. But there is no national security justification for these moves. This, of course, goes to Australian values, and Australian values are about respect for democracy and respect for the rule of law. We're also talking about the Australian value, I think, of the fair go, and the truth is that the fair go is given short shrift by this legislation. The legislation would also give the minister the right to set aside Administrative Appeals Tribunal findings concerning character and identity if the minister believes that it is in the public interest. Now, Labor's reserved our position on that. We want to see some evidence, though, that that is necessary, and that's one of the things that we'll consider through the Senate process. The process up to now has been atrociously handled by the government with a sham community consultation process. There certainly hasn't been adequate consultation with the communities who will be directly affected by this, sort of multicultural leaders who go out there and promote Australian citizenship, who've had that process undermined. And today, of course, on a day in which the great Les Murray, one of the champions of multiculturalism in this country, has been farewelled at St Mary's Cathedral in Sydney, is a day in which it is timely to remind the House of, indeed, the contribution that people who've come from across the world have made to Australia. Les Murray, who came here as a very young man, a young boy in 1957, in the wake of the Hungarian uprising put down by the Stalinists in 1956, made an incredible contribution to turning football into the amazing participation sport that it is in this country today. But he also was a constant advocate of multiculturalism and was an iconic figure in this country from such humble origins. Indeed, he became a character in popular culture with the Tism song, What Nationality is Les Murray? One of my favourites, where the chorus of it is Les is more. Les is more, because indeed everything about Les Murray was larger than life, and I think that his contribution should be valued. We have heard a lot about Australian values, and part of that is respect and inclusion. I do want to make a brief comment about the rejection of the planning proposal to establish a Jewish synagogue at Bondi that was rejected by Waverley Council and the Land and Environment Court recently. This is a very poor sign for our country. We cannot allow the threat of terrorism and violence to stop people being able to practice their faith, whatever faith that is, whether it be a Jewish synagogue or an Islamic mosque or a Catholic church or a Buddhist temple. People have a right to practice their faith in this country, and we shouldn't ever, ever concede that because some would threaten a particular faith or group of people in our society, that we will allow those threats to be successful. And I think that was quite an appalling decision, and I want to put on the record my opposition to that. Australians are made up of people of different religion, different ethnicity, different racial background, different gender, different sexuality, but we make Australia what it is today, this great melting pot, through citizenship. I think that we should support the amendment that's been moved by the member for Watson, and the government really needs to reconsider where it's going with its approach to Australian citizenship, because it should be something that we're advocating, not something that we're making harder.